It's only been a week. I can still talk about Stranger Things, right? I'm not going to be all flowery or hyperbolic about this. Stranger Things Season 5 was... Hey, yo. Let's talk about Stranger Things Season 5. Fair warning, this video will contain spoilers. Stranger Things Season 5 was incredible. Incredibly underwhelming. Now, of course, I'm speaking as a fan of Stranger Things. I'm speaking as somebody who absolutely fell in love with the charm and the storytelling from season 1 and kept up with everything that the franchise had to offer up until this point. Season 3 will forever be my favorite season. And don't get me wrong, this season gave us a beautiful ending to an overall incredible story. But this season's journey to that ending was not perfect. It was a bit bumpy and it left me with more questions than there were answers. But let me start with the good stuff first. Volume 1 was spectacular. This season was absolutely off to a great start with the first 4 episodes, and it did get me excited for Volume 2 and the finale. I thought that Hawkins being under military surveillance was pretty interesting, even though they didn't go too deep into like the consequences or repercussions of what would have happened if the citizens of Hawkins disobeyed or went against quarantine. But I thought them being under military surveillance made sense given the events of last season. I thought it was pretty interesting that the military established a base inside the Upside Down. It really had me looking and being like, this is an interesting turn of events. I wonder what this is going to lead to. Our heroes, the party, as I love to refer to them as, they were not letting that military surveillance and quarantine stuff stop them from trying to find Vecna and stop him. Robin using her job at the radio station to relay coded messages to the rest of the party, and Murray using his job as a supply courier to smuggle in materials for the party to use on the crawl. That's that Stranger Things that I absolutely love. The dynamic between some of the characters were also lovely to see. I mean, it was great seeing the core 4 boys back together, and I really loved the bond between Will and Robin. Robin acting as Will's fairy godmother. No offense. They see each other, they relate to each other, and it was a connection that I didn't know I needed to see up until now. Dustin having a hard time with Eddie's death and him being distant with Steve, the tension between the two of them, which would lead to them hashing out their issues in Volume 2, that was great. Any scene that had Nancy with a gun, walk them down Wheeler, that was my Vecna / Henry, or Venry as we're calling for the rest of the video, he was not f***ing around this season. That scene in episode 4 where he was massacring the soldiers, that was my favorite scene because it kind of reminded me of that scene in Rogue One where Darth Vader was chopping down rebels in the hallway. Come to find out that the Duffers were actually inspired by that Darth Vader scene for their Venry scene. That was nerdgasmic. And while I'm on Venry, I thought that Venry's plan with the kids was actually pretty interesting. I guess the Duffers were trying to illustrate some sort of a cycle with Henry. The fact that he was doing practically the same stuff that Brenner did to him, it was like he was repeating Papa's cycle. And while I'm on the kids, Delightful Derek. Love that kid. The reveal that Will had latent powers was incredible. I absolutely loved it, and I thought that it gave the party an upper hand because for 4 seasons, they only had 11 to fight the Mind Flayer, the Demos, and Vecna. And Will's coming out scene in Volume 2 was great, no matter what the internet says. It was necessary for his development and for the role that he would play later on in the finale when it came to defeating Vecna. It's like people are not understanding. Will was chosen by Vecna because of his personal struggles, which was there from the first season if people were really paying attention. The reintroduction of Callie was very vindicating. I already made a video about that. Joyce being the one to decapitate Vecna was so poetic, and it was well earned because Vecna and the Mind Flayer had taken so much from Joyce and changed her entire life, turned her life upside down. Eleven sacrificing herself was the most fitting ending, and I thought it was perfect. A lot of people on the internet did not like Eleven's ending. They felt like the better ending for Eleven's character would be for her powers to disappear once the Upside Down and the Abyss were destroyed. Eleven's powers, Henry's powers, Collie's powers are not connected to the existence of the Upside Down or the Abyss. It made no difference if the gates to those worlds were open or closed. With the exception of Henry's powers, Eleven's and Collie's powers and all the other kids, their powers were achieved through science. And Eleven had already kind of lost her powers at the end of season 3 and then got them back in season 4. So if she had lost her powers in season 5 when the Abyss and the Upside Down were destroyed, Dr. K and the US military would have still used her for their experiments. Because remember, all they needed was her blood. And don't worry, I'll get to Dr. K and that military stuff later on. In order for the story to end and for things to go back to normal, Eleven had to die with the Abyss and the Upside Down. It made perfect sense for Eleven to choose to end the unhealthy cycle that started with Brenner, that was being repeated by Henry with the kid, and that Dr. K was trying to replicate. And in the end, a healthier cycle continued with Holly and her friends playing D&D the same way that Mike and his friends did. It's like poetry, it kind of rhymes. And overall, it was still a fun experience. I mean, I was still emotionally invested and intrigued with how the story was going to unfold, how the story was going to end. I was still enjoying the performances by the actors and the writing from the Duffers. I was still entertained. With that being said, Volume 2 is where things started to fall apart for me. Once my brain turned on and started to pick up on what I was watching, there was a lot of questions and a lot of concerns and a lot of things that kind of took away from the experience. Immediately after learning that the Upside Down was just a bridge between worlds instead of a world itself as we've been knowing about the Upside Down for the past few seasons, I didn't like it. While the Upside Down being a bridge or a wormhole kind of explains why it was stuck in 1983, it's still kind of disappointing how this world, this alternate world that we all came to know and learn more about in the past few seasons, was actually a filler verse for the real alternate world of the Abyss, which we still don't know anything about. That memory of young Henry that kind of rhymes. That memory of young Henry in the caves killing the scientist guy and opening the briefcase that had the Mind Flayer and the Abyss in it. First of all, how was that scientist guy even able to capture the Mind Flayer and the Abyss as sort of like a pocket dimension? And who was he running from? What made this even worse was that the actor that they got to play young Henry in this season was a completely different actor from the one in season 4, and he looked significantly older, so it made me wonder where this was in the timeline. And it gets even more complicated and confusing once you realize that some of these things in the show was actually from The First Shadow, which is the Broadway play that's apparently canon, and it's like a prequel of sorts because it sort of follows Henry when he's in high school when he first moves to Hawkins. I will get to that later about the Broadway play. And in this season, there's a flashback of Hawkins High in 1955, and it serves no real purpose other than to serve as a connective tissue between The First Shadow and season 5 and to show us that Henry went to school with Hopper and Joyce and them, but it doesn't get explored any further. Then here's the thing. The kid who played Kid Henry in season 4 was not of high school age, which makes it even more confusing about the timeline. Then you have the whole Dr. K military subplot of them hunting Eleven not to kill her, but to use her blood to make more psionic beings, the same way that Brenner used Henry's to make Eleven. Like, this whole time since season 4, we thought that the military was hunting down Eleven to kill her and she became a fugitive, when this entire time Dr. K was really just trying to continue where Brenner left off. But it just seemed like a pointless plot line, especially because of how it ends. So after the party kills Vecna, they make it through the gate and they're captured by Dr. K and the military and placed under arrest. Surely there would be some consequences for them aiding and abetting a wanted fugitive and killing soldiers. But then Eleven sacrifices herself when the Upside Down and the Abyss are destroyed and nothing happens. Dr. K and the military just dip out of Hawkins like nothing ever happened. And then when it comes to the topic of their experiment, it was explained by Kali that they were using her blood to create psionic children, but because her blood wasn't strong enough, the experiments kept failing. But they failed to explain why Kali's blood was weak to use in the first place. I'm pretty sure that Eleven and Kali both have Henry's blood, and they both have Henry's abilities. Eleven has Henry's telekinetic abilities, and Kali has Henry's reality warping abilities. And both of their abilities are equally and proportionally as powerful as each other's. So wouldn't the experiments still work with Kali's blood? And as much as I was excited to see Kali, as much as I loved the fact that she functioned the exact same way as how she did when we last saw her as a means to Eleven's development, her inclusion still felt pretty underwhelming. There were moments where we as an audience wasn't really trusting of Kali. Like, we thought that maybe she was being built up to like betray Eleven or have some type of ulterior motive. People were theorizing that maybe she was the Mind Flayer, which don't know how that would have worked. And that's not projection by us, as I've been seeing people say on the internet. The show was literally planting those seeds, especially with the way that Hopper was glaring at Kali. And in the scene where Kali is eavesdropping on Eleven and Mike while they're talking, it was right there for all of us to believe that she was up to something nefarious. But even if you didn't think that she was going to turn on Eleven at some point, she was barely utilized during her time with the party, which made you think that she was going to play some kind of role later on in some sort of plot twist. That's not on us, that's on the execution. And there were a lot of smaller things that were unaddressed and unanswered. Like, where the hell did the demos go during the entirety of the finale? If the Abyss is their home and if the entire thing is a hive mind, shouldn't they have been able to like be on the front lines to help the Mind Flayer? If Will is still connected to the hive mind, how is he still alive when the Upside Down and the Abyss are destroyed, even when Vecna gets decapitated? Why didn't Eleven and Max have any kind of interaction regarding Eleven essentially force healing Max when she died in season 4? Why did the spores from the Upside Down fall in Hawkins, indicating that the Upside Down was going to integrate into the real world, only for it to not amount to anything in this season? In season 4, it was established through Victor Creel and through Max that music was the key to surviving Vecna, yet in this season, that's retconned. What conveniently stopped that oozing white goo from killing Nancy and Jonathan? And why was Dustin cheered at graduation when he flashed his Hellfire Lives shirt? I'm pretty sure the entire town of Hawkins villainized Eddie as some serial killer cult leader and Hellfire Club as a cult that was practically responsible for the earthquake that they still believe claimed the lives of people in Hawkins. While these unanswered questions and these unaddressed plot lines didn't take away from my overall love for the entire series, it still took away from my enjoyment of the story that was being told, my investment in the story that was being told, and it left so much more to be desired. It's kind of disappointing because I've always praised the Duffer Brothers for being the masters of long-term storytelling, yet 4 years after their 4th season and they deliver a final season that is, in my opinion, kind of incomplete. And while yes, the Broadway play is supposed to fill in some of those blanks, you only would have known that if you flew to New York to watch it. And not everybody could have done that. I don't have fly to New York to watch a Broadway play, money. So during that 4-year hiatus between seasons 4 and 5, it should have been on Netflix to give us that Broadway play. Give us the first shadow as a buffer, as well as something easily accessible to go back to for more context. In 2016, Stranger Things turned the world upside down. It became the biggest thing in pop culture anytime it was on. It kickstarted the careers of many talented actors, as well as reintroduced the world to some seasoned veterans in Hollywood. Hell, it even breathed new life into older songs and movies that were featured in the show. It sort of paid homage to the nerds and the outcasts of the world and showed them that being different can save the world. It paid tribute to a point in time where originality and innovation existed across many forms of media. It referenced a lot of popular and obscure IPs, but still managed to be its own thing that I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years down the line, other movies and TV shows started referencing it. Maybe in like 15, 20 years, we'll get a Stranger Things reboot, or we'll get a show or a movie that was inspired or influenced by Stranger Things. But I genuinely don't think that we'll ever see another show like Stranger Things for another 30 years, if we're lucky. And regardless of how I feel about this final season, I'm extremely thankful that a show like this even existed in the first place. So to the Duffer Brothers, to Sean Levy, and to the cast and crew of Stranger Things, thank you for the last 9 years of showing us that being nerdy, being an outcast, and being different can save the world. But I'm still mad that they didn't put Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears in this season. It was right there for you to use.